there are other issues that will come beyond maybe the control of the ministry and the minister. I'll give an example. When the Council of Ministers approved the budget ceiling on August 5, we as a ministry immediately organized the workshop for the accounting officers and brought everyone to be able to share with them the budget policy and priorities, and also provide the ceiling to each department. And as usual, the accounting officers will go back to their departments and be able now to allocate the funds allocated to them as approved as the ceiling. And that is to allow them to prioritize from the resources proposed for them. And so I would want to answer part of the question that later on came, that some ministers come or head of institution to deny before the House that they were never involved or consulted. It is in the public domain, we are on record, that we conducted those workshops for every spending agency to come and collect the budget templates with the amount approved by the Council of Ministers as a ceiling for them to go and prioritize and allocate. Right Honorable Speaker, I understand the questions of budget allocation is an emotive one. And I'm not surprised that even my colleague ministers come here either direct to the committees to complain, or even in this session where I am seated. And yet, the first group that passed this budget are the members of the cabinet. I do not want to deny that maybe they were not convinced, but as a matter of procedure and law, it was done at that stage. And so, it would be unfortunate, and as part of what you are correctly demanding of us to do the things rightly, that the ministers can argue their ministry's issues at the cabinet, and when a decision is taken there, that is fine. And when we come to this house, it is not the Minister of Finance who is supposed to defend the budget. It is the cabinet that is supposed to defend the budget. But I understand, underline the word, I know it is emotive. Everyone wants a better portion of the national cake. Just for the good of our people, it's not personal. And I want to be on record that I am not criticizing my colleagues, that whatever they are arguing about is personal. It's for the good of our country, and they want to do that through their ministry. I want to talk about the issue of the budget outcome for fiscal year 2023-2024. And I agree with the observations and questions that have been raised. My request, right on the Speaker, is that before I took office, my predecessor, the Honorable Award Daniel, had submitted quarters 1 and 2 of budget execution to this House. And it is on record he was scheduled to table it officially, but he was removed. So part of the budget execution for the previous fiscal year is before this House, right on the Speaker, and we have discussed with the leadership of this House when it should be tabled. The second is that the last quarters are also ready. The report for quarter 3 is also ready for tabling. So we want to agree that we must explain how we spend the money these August House had appropriated. And this will answer some of the questions as to why the approved budget and the actual has a discrepancy. And guided by the rules of this House, that today, in the second reading, we are dealing with general issues, I am not going to get into the details. And I know when I present the budget execution, we will go into details. The next question, right on the Speaker, which is very important, is about the current fiscal deficit as proposed. How is that going to be financed? Very legitimate question. And I remember in this August House, when I read the budget, the proposed budget, I gave highlights of how we intend to close the deficit. One, we have said that our resource envelope, as regards the oil revenues, has excluded the revenues from the sale of crude from Dar Blend. If we had estimated the revenues from Dar Blend and include, we would not see the wide fiscal deficit, but we may be risking if the oil resumption does not happen. But I want to assure the House, and as the government is working very hard to see that it resumes, even if it may happen long after many months of the fiscal year would have been missed. We think that this is going to almost close the fiscal deficit that we are seeing. The second avenue for reaching this is obviously looking for external funding through concessional loans. The reason why we could not indicate how much is the very reason that the Right Honorable First Deputy Speaker raised, that if there were loans, why is Parliament not aware? We would want, if we are going, and we have done it, the government did it, and this House approved the financing agreement between the Republic of South Sudan and Ethiopia for the road construction. And so the path that the government has taken is to be transparent, as our people demand it and they deserve it, that we are having negotiations. And it is a work that has three stages. There is a technical part for loan application or processing. And there is the cabinet that approves it before it comes to Parliament. We would not have jammed that process and indicate how much we expect through loans. And that is another avenue for us to close the deficit that we are seeing. We also have grants. And Right Honorable Speaker, you recall, and you had mentioned it in your opening remarks, that I had to travel to Washington, D.C. to participate in the 2024 World Bank and IMF annual meetings that are mandatory for members, and they also provide an avenue for member countries to present their issues and also seek resources. So in that, we also expect loans and grants. I would like to connect this again to why the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker, Council of State, Honorable Mary, was asking why the donor funding or development partners' contribution is not reflected in our budget. It is because over the years, given the situation of our country before the independence and after the independence, with the conflict and the suspicion that we are not transparent or we don't have the capacity to implement projects, our partners had used what they call zero cash policy or third-party arrangements, where funds allocated to a project would be given to a third party to implement on our behalf. Take, for example, education. Some funding would be given to UNICEF to implement on behalf of South Sudan. What has the government done? And that this was part of our key messages that we took to Washington, D.C., and this is what we are discussing with our partners, that the government now is ready to start implementing project by itself. And so very soon, we are going to have these funding reflected in our budget. We tried as a government to be realistic. First, on one side, the budget has two sides, the revenue and the expenditure. And we asked ourselves, what is the true, at the minimum, requirement over the next expenditure requirement over the next 12 months? And you realize we have not even budgeted for all. Example are the proposals now before us by the committee when they are suggesting an additional funds to be allocated. We've tried as a government to be at where we should be. We can avoid, for example, if we are fallen into arrears on salaries for one person for 11 months, which I don't think that is not true, that is 11 months, because for some it's fewer than that. For others, take for example the foreign mission, is even more. So if we take one person whom we owe as a government salaries for 10 months, and we are budgeting for another 12 months, it's already doubled on one line of spending. And so we can avoid budgeting for both, because we have a debt of the salaries that we do not pay, and we are supposed, as long as they are still employed by the public sector, we have to pay them for the fiscal year that is current. And so we've tried also, there are claims, for example, projects duly executed, and we did not manage to pay them off. We have to carry forward said payment. If there were any loans that we are supposed to repay, we have to budget for the 12 months that is current, or the outstanding that would have been paid the previous 2 months or 3 months or even 12 months if it had also fallen into arrears. So the budget estimate has not been one that the government was ambitious, just to move from 1.7 trillion of the past fiscal year 2023-24 to 4. It is because of the examples I've just given now. Now, if, in our opinion, as the executive, we took 4.2 as the realistic expenditure estimate, then now we move to the next, and that is the other side of revenue. We excluded the potential revenues starting from Dar Blend, loans and grant. These are potential, and we went to realistic forecasting based on the non-tax, the non-oil revenues, the taxes. And we did a modeling, scientific one, and projected about actually 1.1 trillion in revenues. That we can be sure of. It may be less if we fall short by missing that target, or we can even achieve more than that. And I would be happy to share here that we have been tracking the performance of the revenue collection, and for the first time we have moved to around 60 billion in gross terms. We set a target around 100 billion. Now the other revenues, we look at the current oil fields that are operational, though we get very little from the Dar Blend, and estimated the revenues from there based on the daily projected production in barrels. So that is the reason why you would see a huge gap between the revenues and the expenditure. And we believe that this is realistic. I want to also take this opportunity to clarify something, right, Honorable Speaker and Honorable Members, about Minister of Finance being quoted having said this and that. I want to request, as leaders, that we need to verify the sources, or we quote ourselves correctly. I have never said, and I have to be on record, and this can be checked, that I will pay, or the government will pay 3 months on the same date, for example. What we have said, and this would be contradiction, if we came to this house asking for you to approve for us salary arrears, then where else can the government go ahead to pay that arrears in 3 installments of 3 months without your approval? We are on record. We are paying current salaries, and that is what we are working to pay every month.